Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. I'm Ashley Russo, and I am being joined today by a brand new CEO and president of Good Shepherd Rehabilitation Network, Michael Spigel. Michael, we're so happy that you're with us today, and welcome to the Lehigh Valley.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to talk with you today.
Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what was your family structure like? Siblings, parents? Tell me about yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and middle child, older brother, younger sister. I was, people say, a very classic middle child, the one that kind of does their own thing.
The peacemaker?
I don't know about the peacemaker, the one that, maybe charts a different course than the older and the younger. But grew up in Baltimore, got my undergraduate degree from University of Maryland, and, life changed after that. But all my family still lives in the Baltimore area.
And as a child, what were you like? Were you into sports? Were you into hobbies, art? Tell me a little bit about what was life like for you at 8?
I actually, as a kid, preferred to read than almost doing anything else. At 8, at 10, at 12, I was in the library or the bookmobile that would come into our neighborhood twice a week, probably literally every week. So, as a kid, I wasn't that into sports. I was very much into reading, and, it's kind of been, lifelong, one of the main hobbies, or I don't even call it a hobby anymore, just kind of part of my life has always been reading. So I, wasn't big into sports. I
have to tell you, I was, believe it or not, people who know me will probably find this hard to believe. I'm the oldest child, but I used to savor time on Saturdays where I didn't have anywhere to go and I could sit and read for a few hours.
Right.
I remember my siblings being like, "You're such a nerd. Why are you reading?" And I loved it. I loved the concept. And I didn't really think until recently how that might have influenced my path a little bit with storytelling. But I loved a good story and learning things from books. So I think that's fascinating.
So, that's probably the most, biggest part of my memories as growing up. I mean, grew up, kind of normal family, and but reading was, my main pastime. Literally when I say I was at the library twice a week, that habit extended all the way through and post college. For many years, I'd still go to the library a couple of days a week. So that was the kind of biggest part of my growing up in Baltimore.
And what was your career path? I mean, what kind of student were you? Were you into school? Was it something where you knew what you wanted to do, or did you stumble upon it?
Oh, definitely stumbled upon it. So I was like, when I got out of high school and I went to college, my undergraduate degree is from University of Maryland. And I think this came out of my habit of reading. I just had a lot of interest. I was highly curious. So I got into college and I changed my major every semester, I think. One semester, I'm like majoring in computer science, and then meteorology, and then Scandinavian literature. One semester, I wanted to be in library sciences. I thought the whole concept of sciences around the, numerical system in libraries was fascinating. So I stumbled from major to major, and it was more out of curiosity. And then I was in my second year of college, and my father gave me an article about physical therapy. And I didn't know much about physical therapy, but I read the article and I'm like, this sounds something like I'd like to do. I'm a pretty active person, I keep in shape. And then decided I'm going to pursue a degree in physical therapy. But it took me a couple years. And like I said, just kind of, I think from the habit of reading and the curiosity that you gain from that, there were many things that seemed like I would want to do. Whether they would
maybe you identified, like, did you feel like you identify with different characters or different stories of life that you had heard about? And maybe that was something that would be interesting to you.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of that. And I think it's a bit of that wonderment, when you read a lot and you kind of let your imagination go and you get very curious about different things and you wonder, you always ask yourself, what if, or that would be kind of neat to learn about that. So that's what I was more like. So I kind of bounced from area to area, and then decided to pursue, after my dad gave me that article on physical therapy, decided to pursue my degree in physical therapy.
Sort of interesting and inspiring, I think, to our listeners to note that you didn't necessarily know right off the bat. There's so much pressure right now. I have two teenagers, and there's so much pressure for a 16-year-old to be able to
Yeah.
tell you with such clarity what their path is. And I guess I'm a little maybe anti the thought process today. I'm a little more like, that's an opportunity to just go and learn, expand your mind, learn to think.
Right.
We've forgotten that thinking is important, and
Right.
writing. So I love that, because I feel like it's important that people know you didn't know right away. And
No. And I know today the pressure in college is know right away, get in and get out of school in 4 years. But yeah, that's a big lift for somebody 17 years old to kind of know how they want to spend their life potentially. So no, I was fortunate. I got to stumble from major to major to major.
you mentioned not being into sports, but into staying in shape. So how did that translate for you? What were you doing to stay in shape?
So I was big into just running and working out and cycling. So I guess they were all solo activities and solo sports. And that was a really big part of my pastime, of between going to school and working out. It was actually when I got out of college in my undergraduate degree, I actually moved to California. And the reason for moving to California was literally didn't know a soul, but it was to be able to bike and run in the mountains year round. And so staying in shape, fitness has been a core part of my life for decades now. And I work out as vigorously today as I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, if not even more.
Well, first of all, that's just as good a reason as any, I guess, to move across the country. But what were your
Yep.
parents saying through all this? So now they've had, you've bounced around, you finally settle on something, and now you're like, well, I like nice weather and mountains and beaches, and I'm just going to move there. I'm just sort of thinking from a parental
Yeah.
perspective.
So you talk about karma. So, when I got out of school in University of Maryland, and I went to Washington, D.C., which is 30 miles from Baltimore. And I told my parents, hey, I'm moving to Washington. And they thought, you would have thought I was moving around the world, because my brother and sister lived within a couple blocks of my parents. And here I'm moving 30 miles away. And a couple years after that, I said, hey, I'm moving to California. And they were devastated that I was moving to California. And to me, it was like, this is going to be great fun. The karma side of it is we have one daughter. We were in Florida, and she's now in college. And she told us that she planned to go out of state, and she ended up going to school, and she's at school in Boston. And I had the feeling that my parents probably had when I told them I was moving to California. It's like, you're going where? How far from us? How often are we going to see you? And so there is a bit of karma, but to me, it was like wide open going out west, and my parents were, really devastated by that.
I can see that, and I have a son who is committed to CCU down in Fort Worth. So we're talking a plane ride, and that's going to be a whole thing. But I kind of like the concept that, as a parent, and certainly your parents must have instilled this in you, enough confidence and sort of self-value to say, I'm going to make something happen on my own. I don't necessarily need to be close to home. So that's kind of neat too. I really like that.
It was hard. I didn't have the personality, or maybe the confidence in myself on, would I be able to do this? And I remember after a year in California, because I moved out there, I didn't know a single person. But as a physical therapist, easy to get a job. You didn't have that worry about having a job. And I remember after being there about a year, kind of reflecting back, and it was like, I remember talking to family saying, it was far harder than I ever thought it would be. And I did far better than I ever thought I would have done. So, it was a tough move for me, but like I said, I reflected back, and I did far better than I ever thought I would have. And, when I look back on my life, I truly believe without that move, it would have been unlikely my life and career would have gone the direction it ended up going.
That's such an affirming statement, and so cool for you to say. But we're going to take a quick break, Michael. And when we come back,
Sure.
We're going to talk a little bit more about your professional journey, meeting your wife, and how you made the jump from physical therapy to administration in
Sure.
healthcare. All right, you're listening to Unscripted with Russo. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
As a mother of two, I know it can be tough to find activities that everyone will enjoy. Luckily, the Lehigh Valley has so many ways to treat your family without breaking the bank. You can experience cool discoveries at the Da Vinci Science Center or all aboard the WKNS Railroad train for an afternoon adventure. There's fun around every corner of the Lehigh Valley, and you can uncover it all on Discover Lehigh Valley's website. Visit discoverlehighvalley.com for more information.
Welcome back to Unscripted. I'm Ashley Russo. I'm very happy to have our guest here with us today. He is a new friend to ASR Media and a new friend to the Lehigh Valley, Michael Spigel from Good Shepherd. Thank you for joining us. We've heard about your journey as a child and figuring out, took you a little while to figure out physical therapy was your thing. And then you just packed up, left your family in Baltimore and said, I'm headed across the country and you're in California. Tell me a little bit about that stage of your life and how you made that journey from physical therapist to hospital administration and more of an executive track. Did you know that was something you wanted to do?
Actually, it was 180 degrees from where I thought I would end up. So I had been practicing as a physical therapist for about 6 years in California, and I intended and thought my direction would be to go back and gain a PhD and teach and do research, which is about as far away from management and leadership as one could imagine, teaching and doing research. But that was really, where I thought I wanted to go. And there's a really important piece into that, which is the concept of teaching. One of the things I've learned about myself, and we talk about it in my career, is I have a natural inclination to want to help people get better and grow, which is a form of teaching. So I thought I'd go back to school. I went to University of California, Davis. I was going to pursue a PhD in neurophysiology. But, this was like literally stopping work and going back to school. And it really wasn't going to work out that well. So, that path kind of wasn't the path I ended up going. And as a physical therapist, I kind of tripped into the first management job. It was like I was at a very large hospital system. A friend said, there's an opening for a therapist to be a physical therapist and manage 2 small outpatient therapy clinics. This was a big multi-billion-dollar healthcare system and 2 little outpatient clinics. So I'm like, okay, something new to learn. I'm still primarily treating patients. I kind of minimized the management side of it, kind of viewed it as I learned something new, but I'm still treating patients. And that was really my first move into any sort of management. I had little intention of knowing where that would go, but that was kind of that first step from, okay, the teaching research thing isn't likely to work out, but this is something to learn and something new. And so I took that first position in management.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the concept of wanting to help people and that there are so many paths to doing that. And one of the things that I've discovered in this journey or this chapter of my professional career is I love the mentorship piece. I love the concept. And it's interesting. You never think, oh, you own a video production company, but oddly, so much of it is about mentorship, building relationships, furthering people's missions and visions. Like those are the things I'm passionate about. And I think that you can find, if that's your passion, you can find that in a lot of different avenues.
Yep.
So it was an interesting realization. I want to ask you about meeting your wife. I understand she's also a physical therapist.
Yes. So we actually began dating before I moved to California, but we were dating for a couple months and I said, hey, I'm moving to California. And, we had only been dating for a couple months. We had worked together back in Washington, D.C. at a hospital we were working at. And so I moved to California, but we kept in touch. And, after some period of time, she decided to move out to California. As she told me after we were there for a while, I have a plan B. So if it doesn't work out, don't worry about it. I've already got my plan B. But she moved out to California after I had been living there a while. And, we've been now actually in March, we'll be married 27 years.
I love it. Congratulations. And I love a woman with a plan. I like that she made a plan B.
She made it clear. Don't worry if it doesn't work out. I've got a plan B.
No pressure. That's amazing. And after California, where did you guys go and how did you kind of foster your careers simultaneously?
Yeah. So this is an interesting point in my career. So I had been, in my first management job that I talked about, I was now into 4 years of management. So my wife was pregnant, and both our families are from the East Coast. So she really wanted to move back to the East Coast. And I really wanted to stay in California, loved living in California. And those 4 years of being in management, my career progressed, but I had not yet ever accepted that management was my direction. I kept, with each successive year of getting more responsibility, I kept thinking to myself, this is kind of fun, but if it doesn't work out, no big deal. I'll go back and be a therapist. I never made the commitment that this was where I was going. And so when we were moving back east, I decided I'm going to see if management's, as I put it to myself, I want to see if I can be good in management. I'm going to commit myself to see where I can go. Because the prior 4 years, I was like, no harm, no foul. If it doesn't work out, I'll be a therapist.
You went from accidental management to intentional management.
That's a good way to put it. So I made a point that the job I took when I left California was going to be the test case. Could I be good in leadership and management? So I took a job with a company based out of St. Louis that was a national rehab company. And my first position was in Virginia. My wife was pregnant, physical therapist. We had our one and only child, a daughter, and my wife stayed home with her for a couple of years. And when Isabel began, kindergarten, my wife began to, re-enter the workforce as a therapist. So we moved to Virginia, and 2 years later, less than 2 years later, I got promoted, went down to Kentucky for about 14 months, and then got promoted and moved to company I worked for. They were based out of St. Louis and moved to St. Louis. So in the span of 4.5 years, 3 states and 3, I guess you could say, promotions. And so now I'm in corporate, I'm in, and here a couple of years prior to that, I'm a physical therapist, so to speak, in my mind. I still was a therapist, and was at, the corporate headquarters, had been promoted. And the job, being in a national company in a more senior level, increasingly required regular travel. And you travel 1 day a week, and then you travel 2 days a week. And I really, and I looked at my coworkers who might be traveling 4 or 5 days a week, and I had one daughter. And I really determined that lifestyle wasn't really going to work for me. It was really important to me to be part of my daughter's life. And through those couple years at corporate where I was traveling, I got really, mixed up into, am I being the right father? And am I being the right husband? But I'm working for a national company in an increasingly senior position. There's a lot of perks that come with that. But I decided that, what was most important to me was to be a father who was home and who was present. And so that's when I decided to leave and take a job down in Florida, which is where I was before I came here to Good Shepherd. And so it was to be in a local company that really wasn't going to require travel, and I would be as I put it, a present father.
What an amazing gift to your family, to your daughter, and of course to yourself. I think it's so cool to hear that you seized many opportunities to get where you were, but then ultimately looked for a fit for the priorities. And I think there's a great message out there for people as they're developing, really at any stage of their life, but certainly as you're coming along, that it is important to be true to yourself and know what is important to you. Yeah, I mean, different, but similarly, we moved here 16 years ago, and my husband works for St. Luke's, and I took a step away from my network of connections in New York and network news, and had 2 small kids, and we just sort of looked at each other and said, we can't both be working these hours. So, and it was important to me to be present and home with my kids for that time period. And it was a hard decision. I'm not going to say it wasn't easy. It really wasn't. It was a hard decision, but I knew in my gut, we knew as a couple that it was the right decision for our family at that time. And I'm fortunate to be able to have that decision to make, right? Not everyone has that choice. So I admire you for that. That's really neat to know.
And for me, working for a national, this was a publicly traded company, there are a lot of perks and seductions of being in a senior position, of travel and, just all the things that come
Good
with it.
dinners,
Yeah, all those things, retreats that are all over the country, the list goes on and on. But like you said, all that really wasn't what was the driver for me.
Yeah, and
And
that stuff can wait, right? Like I feel like those things will be there, but the
yeah,
moment of time that you have your family is finite. It is finite,
correct.
and So, all right. Well, we want to know more because now you're here in the
Mhm.
Lehigh Valley, and we know it's
Yeah,
new to you. So we want to learn a little bit more about your first impressions and maybe chit chat about what some of the opportunities here are for you as a
right.
couple and as a family, but also with Good Shepherd and the healthcare of our region. So everybody, stay tuned. More with Michael when we get back with Unscripted.
Time to take your workout outdoors. Discover Lehigh Valley is a great resource for finding easily accessible nature trails with stunning views and challenging terrain. Whether you're exploring the Delaware and Lehigh Trail or going for a jog on the Ironton Rail Trail, explore Discover Lehigh Valley to get you started. Follow them on Instagram, Lehigh Valley, PA.
Welcome back to Unscripted. I'm Ashley Russo. So happy to have you joining us with my special guest, Michael Spigel from Good Shepherd. Michael, it's been so fun chatting with you and finding about your journey to get here. You bounced all over the country.
Right.
You were an East Coast guy, Baltimore, and you went out to California. Then you went around a little bit. Then you ended up in Florida before you ended up here. So you've been in a lot of warm weather places with really beautiful oceans near you. Now you're in the Lehigh Valley and you're experiencing winter. Now, granted, that must be familiar from your childhood, but tell me a little bit about your first impressions of this area and the people here.
Sure. So we moved here in mid-July, so just about 6 months ago. And because when I accepted the position with Good Shepherd, it was in March, and that was right at the start of COVID. So we didn't have the opportunity to really explore the Lehigh Valley area, before accepting the position, and we really didn't have any opportunity after accepting, um, between the gap of accepting and the time of moving here. And so we moved here. We initially rented an apartment in Center City and Allentown, and then just about not 4 weeks ago, we moved into a house. We also live in Allentown. We bought a house off in Allentown also. So we decided to stay in Allentown. We think we live in a great neighborhood and love it. So all of our learning, has been both through COVID and only since we got here. And I have to tell you, we love it. I mean, granted, it's been a little bit limiting because of COVID of what we can do and what we see. But the things that have struck me the most about living here, that I did not anticipate was, number one, how much history is in this region. I get really fascinated by driving around and seeing buildings and towns that are hundreds of years old and just wonder what that would be like. I've become incredibly fascinated about Bethlehem Steel and the role in history. And we've been out there a number of times to the museum and touring. Every time I meet somebody who may have worked in Bethlehem Steel, I really like to hear their stories. We've taken advantage of, kind of steel stacks and, some of the activities that go on. So we've loved that. We love the mix of the Allentown city and everything that wraps around it. And the other thing that I've noticed is people here seem to be very proud and positively possessive about the area. That's just kind of the way.
That's a great way to put it, actually. I think there's a tremendous pride. And what happens over time here, it's infectious. It's infectious.
Yes.
I feel like I'm such an advocate for the Lehigh Valley and why I fiercely love it, even though I was not born and raised here.
Right.
When I speak about it in other parts of, travels or with friends around the country.
Yeah. So when I talk to people who have been here, or lived here, or grown up here, made their life here, they're just very positively possessive. When I talk, I could tell stories. I think of one person who I met who worked at Bethlehem for 32 years, and the way he would talk about his 32 years there, and waking up in the middle of the night, hoping he did everything right that day and making whatever he made, because if he didn't, and the building fell down, he would feel guilty. Just there's this kind of positive possessiveness is the way I talk about it. And so that's been something I haven't experienced elsewhere. But it's something that in 6 months really became clear to me within a few months.
And you have been a little limited with COVID, but what has been your overall, I guess, some of the things you've been able to do? Have you been able to try restaurants? Have you been able, you mentioned history, and historic Bethlehem is such a gem in the area. Tell us a little bit about some of the fun things you've been able to try.
So we moved here in July, and I think the first week of August, we went to a drive-in movie. I can't remember the last time I went to a drive-in movie. And that was, wow, this is kind of cool to go to a drive-in movie.
Like a very modern place, but with a lot of nostalgia.
Yeah. So, I mentioned a lot of Bethlehem. I think we had lived here for about 2.5, 3 months. And, we would go out to restaurants, and we ate at one of the restaurants here. And I was like, that might have been one of the top 10 meals I've ever had at this restaurant. So, we've been able to take advantage of, the restaurants to the degree that we've been able to. Like I said, we lived in Center City, and so that's a life of its own, and kind of being out and about and taking advantage of that, and then kind of looking for a home has really kind of exposed us to many areas of Lehigh Valley, and then, as I mentioned, we ultimately decided to settle down in Allentown.
Now, have you had any opportunity to get out on some of the running trails or the biking trails, or see some of the things? Because that's one of the things people often speak about the most here, and I'm excited for you, because I think we offer in the Lehigh Valley a lot of opportunities to connect with nature, that sometimes you only think of associating, those sort of beach communities with. That's really here. We've got this beautiful Lehigh River. We've got these beautiful mountains and hiking trails. So have you gotten to do any of that yet?
Just in a limited fashion.
Okay, well, then we'll look forward to hearing more from you as you explore. All right, so I want to ask you.
It's been hard enough to get adjusted to cold weather. So
I'm sure you gotta thicken up that blood dealing with this again, right?
Oh, you have no idea.
Before I let you go, I do just want to ask you briefly about Good Shepherd, and it's an amazing facility that is world renowned. There is a unique relationship with both of our large hospital networks here with St. Luke's and Lehigh Valley. Tell me a little bit about your vision for Good Shepherd and where you hope to go in your tenure here.
Yeah, great question. What attracted me to Good Shepherd is being in this industry my entire career. When I was called about, and, inquiring about would I have an interest in looking at this position. And, I would get those calls regularly, and, was really happy where I was and did great stuff. But I knew of Good Shepherd. So when I got a call, I knew of Good Shepherd's history. I knew of Good Shepherd's reputation. So I hadn't ever pursued a position, but I'm like, that's a great name, great history, great reputation. I'll be willing to talk about it. And, obviously fast forward X number of months, I was offered the CEO role here and accepted it without hesitation. And, from the day I accepted it, never had an ounce of buyer's remorse of, did I do the right thing? Because I knew I was coming to an organization that has this amazing history, and there are very few companies that have survived 100+ years. Coming to an organization has an incredible reputation, and we provide care to people that, as our population ages and changes, is only going to increase. So the need for our services is only going to increase year in and year out. Couple that with all the advances in rehabilitation and medicine that allow people and will allow people who have had a serious or catastrophic injury or illness, who may be disabled, to really thrive in ways that are different in the future than might have happened in the past. You put all that together, the history, the reputation, the single-minded focus on the work we do and the populations we treat, and then knowing that people are going to have greater needs for our services in the future than they have had in the past. It's just a great set of ingredients and a great recipe. So, my vision for Good Shepherd is that we continue to be a leader in how we think about the specialization of rehab, continue to be a leader in caring for really complex cases, people who have really serious injuries or illness, grow our presence so we become increasingly a greater regional and national destination site, particularly as we build our new hospital that we will be building, a new state-of-the-art hospital. We really intend to, Good Shepherd has been really on the forefront of using new technologies. We really intend to kind of triple down on how, technology is changing every industry. And we really intend to triple down on how technology is going to change the lives of people with disabilities, and really continue to introduce the latest technologies to people in the Lehigh Valley and beyond. The other side of the vision I have is that Good Shepherd becomes a leader in the country for training and developing rehabilitation professionals. So people will come from around the country over time to learn how to do what we do and how to be a better clinician and a better person in rehabilitation medicine. So we want to become not just a destination site for patients. We want to be a destination for the use of new technologies, and we want to be a destination for teaching others about how to do the things that we do and do them very, very well.
Amazing
and then we want
vision.
To be,
I mean, amazing vision. And you do have such a great team there. And
yeah.
What better way to share your expertise than to teach others and to really solidify what you know. So that's really cool. And you were going to say one last thing?
Oh, no, that's good.
Okay, good. Great. Yeah, no, I love that vision. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
But the last thing before we let you go is we do a little rapid fire questions.
Okay.
I just want to confirm that you have not heard these questions.
No, I have not heard any questions.
All right, I'm going to ask and you're just going to answer. You ready?
Okay.
All right, what is your favorite hobby?
My favorite hobby is reading and working out.
What is one food you cannot live without?
French fries.
What actor would you cast to play you in a movie about your life?
That's a tough one. The only person that comes to mind is Daniel Craig. And I only say that because one day I was in the gym and somebody said I look like Daniel Craig. So I'm like,
I love it. That's
pretty
a great
good.
one. We've never got that answer.
So he would be the one I would want to play me.
Perfect. If you didn't have the job you have now, what would you be doing instead?
Oh, easy question. I would be the person, when you watch a TV show and you watch a movie, and at a certain point, a song comes on and it's the perfect song. And you're like, how did they pick that song for that moment? That would be my other job. I'd be the one that would pick the perfect song at the perfect time in a movie or TV show.
I love it. This is your secret skill.
That is my secret skill.
And the last one, name one person that inspires you.
If I think about the last 25 years of my life, I've worked with a lot of patients and people. And there was one particular patient that I worked with for a long time who was probably one of the greatest inspirations to me. Worked with him as a therapist in Washington, D.C. And this particular person, has stayed with me ever since then. I think about him a lot and think about all the lessons that I learned from him.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being our guest on Unscripted.
Thank you. This was great.
Michael Spigel, it's so wonderful to meet you. We're happy to have you in the Lehigh Valley. We certainly want to be a resource and a friend to you in any way that we can. So
thank you.
Everybody, you see Michael around town, maybe don't confuse him with Daniel Craig. Just say, hey, Michael Spigel, welcome to the Lehigh Valley. Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This is Unscripted. Until next time.